my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com, why are Americans still stuck paying for oil wars when EVs cost less to drive? Pretty straightforward. There was an article in yesterday's Financial Times headlined, "Pump Anxiety from Soaring Fuel Prices Prompts Surge in EV Interest." And then the New York Times, day before yesterday, had a piece, "Now is the perfect time to buy an electric vehicle." They note, this is the New York Times article, quote, "Even before prices at the pump started soaring above $4 a gallon, Consumer Reports found that the typical EV owner saves $6,000 to $12,000 on maintenance and fuel over the car's lifetime." The reason why is fairly obvious. On maintenance, instead of having, over 100 parts, moving parts in an engine, you've got a couple of motors, which have like basically one moving part or maybe two. So, there's just not that much to go wrong. You don't have to do oil changes. The garage doesn't stink if you have a garage. Your car is not you're not polluting the atmosphere. You're not producing poisons that cause a minimum of 10,000 deaths from cancer every year and a minimum of 1 million cases of asthma every year. None of that is happening. And the electricity, the average price of electricity in the United States at retail is around 20 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm paying about 10 cents a kilowatt hour at night, but then it goes up to like 30 or 40 cents during the day, but I don't use electricity during the day. We've got batteries and solar power. But the point is that at night, when I charge my car at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, that's the equivalent of 75 cents a gallon gasoline. The national average at 20 cents a kilowatt hour, that's the equivalent of $1.50 a gallon gasoline. So, it's pretty straightforward stuff. You've got, an auto industry that was moving in this direction, and around the rest of the world it is. Now, Louise and I were in Norway last summer, and starting next year, they're not going to allow the sale of internal combustion engines any longer. And every other car that we saw, probably more than that, was an electric vehicle. I mean, they're just all over the place. And that's increasingly true all over Europe. In China now, electric vehicles are 60% of all new vehicle sales. It's popping up all over the world. And this insane war that Donald Trump declared along with Benjamin Netanyahu on Iran, with no end in sight, Trump says, oh, it'll just be another 2 or 3 weeks. So I remember Lyndon Johnson talking about, stuff like that right back in 1965 and 66. Oh, yeah, well, and then just a little bit more, just another few weeks, just another couple months, and then pretty soon you got, 2 million dead Vietnamese and 54,000 dead American soldiers. This is not a good thing, but it's also driving up the cost of fuel, and for cars. So I just, I lay it all out. I use hair dryers as the unit of metric, right, and puncture some of Donald Trump's myths. So, you can find it at HartmannReport.com. I think you'll find it interesting. Share it with other people. Jimmy Carter tried to save us from this, by the way, you'll recall, declaring an energy emergency. And back in 78 or 79, I think it was 1979, said that by the year 2000, 25% or 20% of America's electricity would come from solar power. It would have if Reagan hadn't taken all that money from the fossil fuel industry. If, fossil fuel billionaires like the Kochs and others hadn't put so much money into funding think tanks and media outlets and operations that basically lie to us about climate change. But here we are, and we'll be discussing climate change at some greater length, in the third hour of the program. So, bottom line, that's a possibility. With regard to what's going on with J.D. Vance, this is wild stuff. Donald Trump has basically declared war on blue state America. He's not giving blue states FEMA money. He's cut off some blue states from some of their, like Medicaid resources and things. And now he's over on his Nazi-infested, failing social media site. He said, Vice President J.D. Vance is now in charge of fraud in the United States. That's actually a pretty accurate sentence. J.D. Vance is now in charge of fraud. Well, I'd say he's the number 2 guy in charge of fraud. Donald Trump is the guy who's really in charge of fraud in the United States because, his entire presidency, his entire career has been a fraud. So, but anyway, he goes on to say, we will call him the fraud czar, and his focus will be everywhere, but primarily in those blue states where crooked Democrat politicians like those in California, Illinois, Minnesota, Somalia, beware, Maine, New York, and many others have had a free-for-all in the unprecedented theft of taxpayer money. So this is what Trump is doing. He's declaring war on these states. He's looking for excuses to hurt these states because they didn't vote for him. They hurt his little feelings. Our little pampered, diapered, 79-year-old baby in the White House who has the emotional maturity of a 10-year-old. He established this task force back on March 16th with an executive order naming Vance as the chairman, and then he wraps up his rant over on his failing social media site. He says, the numbers are so large that if successful, we would literally be able to balance our American budget. Raids have already started in L.A. Good luck, J.D. Well, this is, again, lies. This is, if Trump says it, odds are it's a lie. Sadly, we've over 30,000 of them documented by the Washington Post in his first term as president. And now this. So, but this punishment of the red states, I think that, the red state governors need to get to, or excuse me, this punishment of the blue states. The blue state governors need to get together and look at the ways that they can fight back. Because just waiting for Trump to go away is not going to be enough. And this, people are being harmed by this. And it's going to get worse.